Hey guys, it's CJ. Two quick things about this episode before we get started. The first thing is that I was a complete and total idiot and I left my air conditioner on, so when you hear this hum that's going to be in the background, that's what it is. I apologize for that. That was a complete and total newbie move on my part. I'll make sure I won't happen again. Again, I apologize. The other thing that happened was that the call between me and Grant dropped at one point. So when that happens, I'll throw in a little intermission music and then get back right into the good stuff. So without any further ado, let's get on with the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Motion Canon. I am CJ Hitchcock, and this week we are joined by Grant the Thief. How you doing today, Grant?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, CJ?
I'm doing alright. Doing okay.
Good.
So,
glad to be here. Glad to be back. It's been a few weeks since I've been on.
It's been a while. And
it's just you and me, Maverick and
yeah.
Goose. We don't have a third this time. Everybody else bailed on us.
You heard they're coming out with a sequel to Top Gun, right?
Well, of course. I'm wondering. I need closure, right, on these deep emotional threads. Actually, if they make a second Top Gun, I want 90 minutes of volleyball. Like that's really all I'm in for. Like, and then just Val Kilmer biting at people.
If it's just Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer in a Haikyuu movie, I would be okay with that.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm down. I mean, that would be.
Yeah,
I mean, the Sakuga would be unreal, right? I mean,
yes, it would be. I mean, just
I
can't spell Tom Cruise without Sakuga. So.
I tried to. Isn't that his daughter's name? I can't remember. No, I tried to make the Val Kilmer bite thing in the air, and that's the worst kind of podcasting because it doesn't really make much of a noise. Like, just like, yeah, Val Kilmer bite thing. Okay. Like, who even responds to a statement that way? Like, what if I am dangerous? And then you bite at them? I don't know. Like, I don't even know if it's subtext anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Wow. We're already completely off course, but...
This is an anime podcast, right?
So within the last few weeks, there was an article that has popped up in the New York Times. If you haven't heard of it by now, the title of it is Boomerang and Crunchyroll of Old Cartoons and Fresh Anime. And it's caused a bit of a stir.
I think that's a political way to put it. Certainly, the frenzy was the drama was there. The drama was there.
yeah. There were hot takes to be had, and this article is it's odd, and I don't. Why don't you go ahead and explain your thoughts? Because I kind of feel like my thoughts are going to be a little bit all over the place with this thing.
Yeah, I think mine are too. I mean, I wrote a piece on it this week for Wave Motion Canon. Even though the article itself is almost, well, I guess it's over 2 weeks old now at this point. And I caught a bit of the frenzy on Twitter, and I only saw a little bit from my bubble. But my understanding was that, there was a lot of kind of backlash and stuff on social media and also on YouTube. So, once that quickly compounds and magnifies what otherwise would be, I mean, if I'm being honest, when I first read it, I certainly had a pretty negative reaction to it. But when it comes to, like, if hot takes are the hare, I am definitely the tortoise. Like, I take my time with things usually. So even if I don't like something, I'll grumble about it, walk away for a little while, come back and look at it, walk away for a while, chew on it, come back again. So I definitely thought about it quite a bit. And honestly, I think the article's pretty tame overall. And I think one of the things that struck me about it, there's a lot of, at least from what I could see, there was a lot of attempts to sort of address the author and try to open a dialogue with him and all that sort of thing. And I'm not going to comment on the effectiveness of doing that, but what struck me about the article was it felt it was about 80% about the Boomerang app that's coming out and classic cartoons,
Yes.
and his the author Glenn Kelly, like he's a professor of, I don't recall now, of animation or film, and his sort of, he was talking about the links between this kind of golden era of classic American cartoons or Western cartoons and sort of the impacts that it's had on film. And then the last 20 or 30% it felt like was about Crunchyroll, and I don't
Right.
know, I don't want to get into author speculation. That's a big thing that, at least in my piece, I tried to avoid. I mean, I think the discussion of the two apps, it's very much, they're sort of discussed in parallel rather than pitted against each other, which still feels like a bit of a comparison. But he never says like, oh, Boomerang is better, or oh, Crunchyroll is bad. He never really makes those statements, but he does say, well, there's this app that's coming out and it's got these cartoons, and these cartoons have a lot of cinematic value. There's another app too, it's Crunchyroll. I tried a show and I didn't find much cinema there, and that's really it. He doesn't directly compare them. He doesn't really it. I think if he had cut the Crunchyroll element, I mean, not to be an editor here, and again, I don't know what editorial conditions he was under. Maybe his editor said compare these two apps, and this was just the way. Maybe he sort of, rather than compare them directly, he's like, well, I'll just talk about both, and so I don't know. Like that's the thing. We get into speculation. We can create straw man arguments and stuff, and that becomes a dangerous game.
Well, it just that was the big takeaway that I got from this, because like when I read it through the first time, the thing that didn't stick with me was his little bit about anime. It was more about the Boomerang service and how much he enjoys that service. And I'll be fair, like I would really like to get the Boomerang service, because like I've been wanting to watch. I mean, who doesn't want to watch Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck cartoons and stuff like that? I mean, like that's great. I would love to have an app like that. I don't understand why there was a need for a comparison between these two apps, and that's the thing that kind of confuses me about this article as a whole, is that I don't understand why it exists. And like I don't mean that in like a really mean kind of way, but like I don't understand what the general purpose of this article was
That's
as a
and
whole.
again, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's the thing where we have to get into speculation, because he doesn't, and I don't like to go there, but I think the article, like if you pretty much just ignore the Crunchyroll portion, it's a strong case for classic Western cartoons, which I also love and adore.
Mhm.
And I agree with you. The Boomerang service, I remember when at one point in time, this was many years ago, I guess when Boomerang was maybe first starting up, that uh, we had it, and I enjoyed that channel because it played a lot of classic cartoons. And I mean, back even when Cartoon Network used to run that stuff quite frequently. I seem to recall as a child in the '90s that they used to do a thing called June Bugs, even where they would do like 24-hour blocks of Bugs Bunny cartoons. And
Yes, I do
I'm,
remember that quite vividly.
I,
Yes.
I used to eat that stuff up. I mean, I love, and if I had an app where I could stream like, even the terrible Hanna-Barbera stuff like Herculoids episodes or Mighty Mightor, like Thundar the Barbarian, like I'm there, man. Like that's my stuff. I completely enjoy that, and I don't think much is gained by really comparing them, and I kind of discussed at length in my article sort of why. And I think the big problem especially is that, I mean, first off, comparing like a selection of curated classics, like some of the best that Western animation has to offer from a time when it was vibrant and creative.
It's the best of the best of Western animation for sure. And
Yeah,
he
and
kind of went ahead and went to the Crunchyroll app and picked one of the most standout titles. And when I say standout, I don't necessarily mean like this is the highlighted show of the season. This was the title that stood out the most because of the word bastard in it. And he watched an episode, wasn't keen on it, and it kind of seemed like he just watched the one thing and didn't really consider too much else. Maybe an episode of Fist of the North Star because he had heard of that one. Maybe, but it's again like it just doesn't really seem like it's a much of a fair comparison, because you have like this isn't like cartoons from like uh, Japanese animation from like the 1940s and comparing it to what the Western stuff was doing. Like that would
right.
be an interesting article. But here it's two different time periods, it's two different genres, two completely different audiences. And again, like it just kind of leaves me a bit confused for what the overall goal of this piece was.
Right. which, and again, I share that confusion, and I think that's probably why people got such a bad taste in their mouth. Even though the text of the article is certainly not harsh by any means, like he's like, well, it wasn't for me, good day. And to be honest, as I discussed, I share a lot of his taste. I really enjoy classic Western cartoons. He name drops Akira, the 95 Ghost in the Shell. He loves the Fist of the North Star movie. He doesn't care for Akashic. I mean, that's, if you want to take a quick sample of my tastes, that's a pretty good checklist.
Yeah.
Because I agree with him. I tried to watch Akashic, and it wasn't for me.
Yeah,
but I think it's I think it's the discussion of the two apps particularly, and the price points that are called out that makes it have this kind of black cloud hanging over it. That if you catch it at the wrong time of day, you're stressed out, you're frustrated, and to see a piece like that, I think it's not a huge leap to get very upset, and then things really spiraled out of control into some other things that I don't really think are necessarily that fruitful to discuss, and I didn't even see all of it, so I don't even know where to begin. I saw a lot of stuff flying around, but I think there's the big takeaway for me especially was that once I thought about it, I was like, to be fair, I have done exactly that. For a long time, I walked around with I referenced in prior pods, at least on my own podcast and some of the wave motion stuff too. I spent nearly a decade away from fandom. Somewhere in the later, the 2005, 2006, 2007, somewhere around there, I just kind of walked away from it because I just felt like it just wasn't for me anymore. I just felt like I wasn't seeing the same things that I had seen growing up. And I didn't like a lot of things that I was seeing, or they were, sort of run of the mill. And I spent a long time away. And part of that was because I kept comparing things that were coming out to the classics of my youth. Like, I wasn't sitting around comparing them to the average stuff I had seen. All I was comparing them to was Macross and Akira and Ghost in the Shell. Like, that's all I would compare them to. And I was like, oh, you're not as good as these greats. I don't have time for you. So I sort of, whatever his intent, I have done that exact same thing. So I'm not going to just run out there and judge him and say, how could you do?
And, to be completely honest, I am starting to kind of fall into that camp right now where I kind of consider taking a bit of a break from the fandom, especially with this season in particular. Because there's, like, for me, it's like, especially with how we have the site set up, it kind of seems like we're constantly looking for the next big hit. And when we don't have, like a Mob Psycho or, even a Maid Dragon, like, it gets really kind of disheartening. Be like, okay, like, how am I supposed to talk about anything that's going on right now when everything is just kind of lackluster? And that gets very tiring and taxing, and I can kind of understand that viewpoint of, like, wanting to take a break from everything, and I think it's a completely valid thing to do every now and then. And it is kind of interesting because I do kind of get that a little bit from this article, because it seems like of the stuff that he watched, it kind of satisfied two things. It satisfied, the sexual side urge and the urge for violence, like, sex and violence. Those were the two things that he kind of brings up with the Bastard Show and Fist of the North Star. Well, what he sees in the Western stuff, he sees classic stuff that has inspired creators for generations to come, stuff that has a personal connection, stuff that makes him laugh. And I think there is merit in that, in kind of wanting to, say, like, look, the stuff that clicks with me doesn't click with, the stuff that I click with Western animation doesn't click with me in what happens with, Japanese and whatnot, and that's fine. I think part of the problem is that because we are in the fandom and we know that this genre can offer so much more than just TNA and, buckets of blood, that we get kind of tired of hearing, people of authority coming down on us and being just like, you're just watching it for the tits and ass, and, what you're doing is violence and sin and everything else. And
those violent Japanese porno cartoons, the sort of standard phrase that has been for a very long time.
Right. And, that does get kind of tiring, and this article does kind of support that idea a little bit. But at the same time, I think I think that idea might have been unintentional in like
Yeah.
what he was trying to get across, but at the same time, with the tone of the language in the piece, it does come across that way, unfortunately. And
Right.
another thing that I thought was kind of weird too is that he was talking about basically where he ends the article. I like this quote, so I'm going to go ahead and read it. I logged onto Crunchyroll with my PS4, and the menu is configured to work best not with the Xbox's universal remote, but with a gaming controller.
Yeah, that was.
That's a very weird quote to end on, like with the entire article. And it does kind of seem like it is supposed to be a joke, but at the same time, it does kind of feel like the way that he describes the app for Boomerang, where it's pretty much only available on tablets and whatnot. It's not available on basic Blu-ray players and PlayStations, but it kind of seems like, well, this is Crunchyroll is the thing for commoners who are stupid and don't want anything, and that, like, especially with the way that last line reads, it does kind of seem like, especially when you have other phrases like, the service knows its core demographic. It's, again, like, it does kind of come off a bit on the kind of pompous side a little bit. And it might be in, unintentional humor, or, it might be humor. Because, again, like, one of the things I learned recently was that when you're communicating with somebody, really only 7% of what you're saying comes across with people when you're talking to them. It boils down to three things. 55% of that is body language, and the percentage of what's left is tone of voice. And when you're reading an article like this, when you only have 7% to go off of, it's really hard to tell if someone is joking, kind of doing a nudge, nudge, wink, wink kind of thing, or if they're being very serious and trying to be holier than thou. And that can be very hard to decipher with articles. And, I've had that problem too with, when we go and write stuff for, the site that we're on. It's a very easy thing to do where you try and write something and being just like, haha, I'm making a joke. That's not always going to get across because you don't have that tone of voice that you're saying it in. And I do wonder how much of that applies to this article, how much of it was kind of jokingly said. Again, I want to avoid, everything that happened outside of this article, but just looking at the article itself, I do kind of wonder how much of this is meant to be kind of a joke.
Right, and that's part of why I tried not to speculate on authorial intent, because so much of communication is tone and body language, and you can't, trying to get into the headspace and say, oh, here's what he's trying to do. I mean, unless an author states an intent, all we can do is speculate, and we can certainly say, well, he doesn't really directly compare them, but he brings these things up in a pretty particular order and way. We can infer, and maybe that's the intent. But another thing that I tried to go into a little bit was that, for all we're saying that maybe this isn't a fair comparison, if he's trying, it's not fair to compare Akashic to these classic Western cartoons. That's an unfair fight. Another thing I tried to bring up is that, to his credit, if he was really looking to do a hit piece, like if he was really looking to damage anime, he could have dug a little deeper into that Crunchyroll catalog, maybe not that much deeper, and found something particularly wretched or particularly like upsetting for, I mean, 'cause, again, let's be real, even as anime fans who know that it's a wide fandom, there's lots of different tastes out there, there's still some things on there that will make some of us flinch and kind of go, ooh, I'm not really comfortable watching that show because it's got some content that I just have issues with, right? I mean, we all know that there are some shows on here that appeal to a very limited demographic that the rest of us really don't, kind of makes your skin crawl a little bit. So I think if he was really looking to cause like serious damage, I think he could have scrolled that mouse wheel a couple more times and rolled the dice and really found something horrible. So I don't know if I want to sit here and, again, I don't want to speculate that, oh, here was his intent, he's trying to take down Crunchyroll. Maybe, again, speculation, maybe there was an editorial decision, hey, you've got to compare these two apps, we really want you to kind of play up Boomerang. Maybe he tried to pick something, he's like, I'm going to pick something that's, because Akashic is a very particular choice. I mean, if we think about the recently Miles on Twitter tweeted out in the Crunchyroll account tweeted out the United States map that they do, where they show each state the picture of the show that's most popular there, and they control for like long running shows and sequels, like so none of your Dragon Balls, Attack on Titan, any of that kind of stuff. They just see what's original and what's new, and what are people watching. And Akashic is they released like 10 or 15 states on there where Akashic was the most popular thing, so we can surmise that Akashic is pretty popular. Mm-hmm. But it's maybe not I mean, obviously, if they allowed for sequels, Attack on Titan would just be the entire map, probably. But, like, it's clearly not the most popular thing, but it's a pretty popular thing. But it's not super off-kilter. Like, it's not... I mean, it's just kind of it appears to be kind of a light novel-type show thing. I don't really know.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, was that this seems like the, generic run-of-the-mill light novel kind of series that we've seen couple of dozen times before.
Right.
And when he makes that statement on here about the main character walking into the room with the girls in their underwear, it's just like, yeah, I can list you like 20 different other anime that does the exact same gag. I don't understand why this particular one is any special. And again, like, it's one of those things where it's just like, yeah, that can raise an eyebrow for some people, especially those who are unfamiliar with the fandom. But for me, I just don't see how that applies to how this is bad. Again, like, it's just...
Well, and I think, I think the disconnect, because the article itself doesn't really go in super hard on Crunchyroll. I think it would have probably just been a stronger piece in general if it was just about Boomerang, because up until then, I was agreeing with the article. I'm like, yeah, cool, Boomerang. I love all this stuff. It's great. So, but I don't know. And I think part of my article, again, I tried to not, let's not go after the author or anything like that. I tried to make it maybe we can make it a learning exercise, both as individuals who sometimes we get weary in the fandom and we shut ourselves off and become bitter sometimes about new things that are coming out, but also as a community. So, okay, so let's just assume it was complete ignorance. He just, he was like, I don't really know what fans are watching these days, because clearly if he's familiar with Akira, Ghost in the Shell, and Fist of the North Star, it seems like he's got some prior familiarity, and people mentioned to me that, yes, he has written about anime in the past, so, and I'm sure, as someone who speaks about animation at a university level, he's got to know about some of these landmark films in Japanese animation. So maybe he legitimately was just like, I don't really use Crunchyroll much, if at all, and I'm just going to pick something on here. And I don't think that's such a leap, because I mean, even for myself, I've only really been using Crunchyroll in the last year and a half or so. Before the Hulu purge, that was my main site to get anime off of. I was just watching it on Hulu, and I didn't really think anything of it. And I had tried to use Crunchyroll, but I'd had some issues on my PlayStation, so I was like, well, I'll just stick with Hulu for right now. And then I've slowly transitioned over to Crunchyroll. So I don't think it's a complete kind of fictional scenario that he could be familiar with quite a bit of anime and still have not used Crunchyroll and just pick something from the list. And so the takeaway that I tried to bring out, and this may be a pie in the sky idea, but maybe like, okay, as a community, are we doing enough to provide some kind of guidance for people who are new to, maybe not necessarily new to anime, but new to the current fandom? Like, the idea of even a Crunchyroll type thing, I think certainly modern fans especially don't realize how intimidating Crunchyroll can be. Oh, I'd like to watch modern anime. Oh, here's a million billion shows. Like, here's literally a gajillion options. What do you want? That can be that wall of content, especially when all your frame of reference is 20 years old. Like, that can be kind of intimidating.
Yeah, because like I find even like nowadays when you're trying to get someone to watch anime with you, or whatever, like introducing a friend to this whole entire new genre of animation and whatnot, I find it's always best to give people a map. It's like, okay, go ahead and watch this and this and this, and here's a good site for this. Like, if you're going in completely blind, it can be horrifically terrifying just how many different shows that you can come across, especially just... You would think that with Crunchyroll, how it separates everything by seasons would make it a lot easier. It'd be like, oh, okay, okay, let's see what the new shows are for, this season. And then you get onto the new season, and there's like 30, 40 different shows to pick from just what came out during the one season. Like, that's just terrifying in a majority of those shows. look kind of squicky, and it's,
Right.
you know,
Especially if you're used to older fandom where it's like 30 or 40 shows might be the sum total of all your knowledge of anime, like that might have been someone's entire collection. Whereas now that's just what comes out every 3 months. So, I guess my thing is, so I don't think it's an outside scenario that someone would come to Crunchyroll, have heard about it because it's growing in subscriber base and all that, tried to pick something on there and randomly selected something like Akashic and then walked away because they didn't have any guidance. And so I guess I was sort of positing to the community, could we build sort of a better, onboarding mechanism? Could we have, even, I guess I'll use some gaming analogies, but even things like your League of Legends and Dotas and Heroes of the Storm, these very complicated MOBA games with huge rosters of characters, all these very complicated interactions of powers and stuff like that. They have a tutorial that at least gives you some idea of like the basics of what you're going to be expecting, and you'll never learn enough to be good in the tutorial, but it will at least let you know like where are your powers, how do you click and move around, or say a game like Magic the Gathering, which has a library of cards that is I don't know the number. It's a huge number. But then the interactions in the game are very complex, right? So,
right.
but they
With
still
Magic
put
the
out starter
Gathering,
packs.
there's at least 5 digits for that number of how many different cards there are.
Easily,
Yeah.
right? And but they also put out starter packs that are like, okay, well, here's a basic introduction to what the mechanics are for the game. This walks you through, so you at least get a feel for the tempo and the flow before we really just kind of cut you loose into this just huge, vast library of colored cardboard, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if I know we can, as a community, there's just no way to build the closest thing to a comprehensive sort of summation of anime is something like Crunchyroll, and even it cannot contain everything. But could we build some sort of guideposts or simple, 1-2 page guide with here's a couple of terms you might need to know. If you like maybe this genre, here's 2 or 3 shows to check out and a few sentences why. Like just some kind of, or even just like an introductory video, like, hey, welcome to anime fandom. Maybe you're new, maybe you're returning. Here's kind of where we're at, and here's some places you can go.
The idea I was just now thinking of when you were bringing this up is, when you start up a new Netflix account, it does kind of make you go through, okay, what are some movies that you've liked before? And it gives you, like, an idea, and then it kind of, like, just like, what genres do you like? Do you like love? Do you like that? It would be really interesting to see Crunchyroll do something similar when it comes to new users. It could be like this option and just like, would you like a guideline? And, then you would go ahead and fill out like a quick short survey, and then it'll give you like a list of things that you could watch, either from the current season or the stuff that's in their library. Like, I think that would really help out a lot of people who are trying to get into it and kind of avoid the situation that happened in this article.
Precisely. And if it can happen, I know it can happen because, if I had not been persistent in my return to fandom, right, or really the reason I left the fandom was exactly that. There was so much coming out, and in the past I had just been able to pick up anything off the shelf and enjoy it, either because it was so good or so bad. But there was all this middling stuff, and it was, at the time, had to buying DVDs and stuff or trying to just download random torrents or whatever. It's like I couldn't get a handle. The fandom was growing faster than I could curate it and faster than I could come to grips with it. So I would have really liked some guidance at the time because I just walked away. I couldn't handle it. But I think it, especially with the sheer, we all know there is such a volume coming out, and a lot of it is middling at best. I mean, really, even just on anime Twitter or anime Twitter, or even just on your forums and stuff, there's probably only a couple dozen shows that really get talked about, which means that I bet if we had some kind of way to guide people to, all they need is one show, really, right? All they need is 1 or 2 shows to really enjoy, and they will seek out more. I mean, that's really how it starts for all of us. We get hooked on something. We see something that we've just never seen before, right? All of us have that sort of early, that first exposure story when we really, our eyes get open. We go, oh my gosh, this can happen in animation. And then we as fandoms, we dive in. I mean, if anime has one constant in fandom, it's a passion to seek out more and to always be looking for that next thing. And I think if we had a way to guide them to something that would ignite that passion a little bit better than the current system of, hi, welcome to the warehouse, all the boxes look the same, just grab something. I don't think that's an effective way to build lifelong fans. And even if we had a system like that in place, like there's no doubt in my mind we would still see articles like this. We have always seen articles that don't quite represent fandom as we see it, and there will continue to be that until the end of time. Right? I mean, that's the way it is, especially in a culture where we comment on media so much. But I think we could mitigate some of that, or at least be like, well, we've done due diligence. Like if we want anime to be taken seriously as a fandom, maybe there's some things we can do, some serious things that we can do to make it accessible. I think, and I don't think accessibility is necessarily a bad thing. Like I think helping people love what we love, I think that's something that we all benefit from.
Like there's no help. Like an elitist mindset is not going to help the community at all. Like that just builds, it builds walls and barriers, and it keeps people out. And that's not what you want when you want a community to grow and flourish. You want to be welcoming, and you want to be, as friendly as possible, and be understanding that everyone's not going to have the same opinion you do. Everyone's going to have a different taste. Everyone's going to have their own thoughts and opinions before coming into the genre. Like there are going to be some people who have this mindset that anime is porn, and that's all they're going to think about when they go into something, even as, something as pure as like Nanbo, the cute little, cardboard cats. Like there's going to be a person that comes in and be like, anime is porn, and they watch that and they're still going to walk away and say, that's porn, even though it's just little cats. And, that's going to happen. Like it's one of those things you just kind of have to learn to accept, and maybe it's because we're a bit older than what a lot of anime fans are kind of currently at least when it comes to the vibe of like being online and whatnot, because you have like a lot of people who are in their early teens and still very much in that rebellious kind of phrase, like damn you old man kind of thing. And like for myself, that I find that doesn't help. That just makes things worse. Like,
oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay, I cut out there for about 30-45 seconds. I apologize. Hey, bud.
Oh,
okay.
Good
Sounds
lord,
like
that took forever.
Yeah,
oh,
it
man.
really did. Okay, so audio issues aside, I think we were discussing Yanbo.
No, I was going off of a tangent about old people and how young people shouldn't respond to that.
Okay.
But, why don't we go ahead and, do you have any other thoughts on the article?
I mean, I guess in general, I mean, I my response to it, both personally and in writing, was a lot more muted, and I think that's probably the best way to go. I know there was a lot of other discussion that was probably more lively and more, dramatic and exciting, but I don't. I hope we can at least walk away from it in a positive sense, right? I think that the takeaway is we can't make everyone understand anime, even former anime fans, but we can at least do something to, or at least I think we can as a community, do something to help make the segue easier for people in the future, so that hopefully we can minimize or mitigate this, or even when it happens, we can say, well, we did our due diligence, right? We did the things that we needed to do, and if they don't use them, I mean, that's ultimately up to them to still move past those kind of tutorials or inventories of tastes or whatever.
Yes. Yeah, pretty much my closing thoughts are going to be the exact same. Not everyone's going to have the same opinion. It's going to be completely and totally fine if someone does have a different opinion, no matter how, I don't want to say wrong they are, but even though it does seem like they are coming from an area that is completely unjust and found, they are still entitled to those opinions. They are still entitled to that viewpoint, and that's fine. Like, definitely. Again, like, I honestly, when I read this article for the first time, I'm just like, okay, so it's a guy who doesn't like anime. I don't see why everyone's getting so upset. And again, like, and that's honestly just my viewpoints on things right now. Again, like, it's just like, not everyone's gonna like the stuff that we like, and I am completely okay with that. If anything, I feel like that makes our genre more special, is because it does turn people off. And again, like, there's a little bit of that, punk rock rebellion there, a little bit.
Yeah.
So, like, if anything, this justifies my love for that. So,
Right. We get to keep our special club because some people don't want to climb the rope ladder, and that's fine.
That's fine. Like, again, that's ultimately all this is really going to come down to for me. It's just like, it's a guy who didn't like the random shows that he watched on Crunchyroll. That's fine. He liked Boomerang. Cool. I'll probably pick up the Boomerang app.
Yeah, I wish that had a free version. I would definitely like to check it out and just kind of see the depth of that catalog. I mean, that's a different discussion, I guess, but I'm glad to know there's a Boomerang app coming out. I really hope that we can maintain access. Again, I like archiving the works of the past, and whether it's old anime or old animation or old films, whatever, I want us to keep that link. So I'm very excited that they're doing that, and I don't want to. I really would like to check it out.
Same here. Again, like I it's one of those things. Like I feel like both of these apps are worth mentioning for their own rights and reasons and stuff like that. And I think that's kind of what this article was trying to do. But unfortunately, when he went to the Crunchyroll app, he didn't care for the things that he was watching, and that's ultimately what I think ultimately happened. But again, like, it's unfortunate that this happened, especially in a big newspaper like the New York Times. But again, that's going to happen, and that's fine.
Yeah, we'll never be rid of these kinds of articles. Hopefully, we can convert more people, rather than. But we'll never this type of writing. People not liking a thing. That kind of article will always exist.
Right. You catch more flies with honey, as they say. Yes. So let's go ahead and discuss what we've been watching this week. Now, Grant, I am under the impression that you have been watching pretty much just one thing and one thing only for the last month and a half. Would you like to talk about that?
Yes. Sure. I wanted to keep up with Attack on Titan Season 2 and My Hero Academia, but Season 2. And I watched the first 4 or 5 Attack on Titan episodes. I liked it, but then I kind of fell off for a bit. And I wanted to wait for them to build up a little bit more. And honestly, even though I was even more excited for My Hero Academia, I was talking with some friends about it, and some that had not liked it. They had said that they had watched it weekly and had not enjoyed it, and I was like, well, it's interesting because I watched it all kind of in 1 or 2 sittings.
In our last episode, which you haven't gotten the chance to listen to yet, Jimmy was actually talking about how much he was liking Season 2 of My Hero Academia, and was kind of describing the same thing that you were doing. So.
Right, so I think I'm going to wait until all of My Hero Academia Season 2 is up so I can do kind of what I did last time and knock it out in like a weekend or something. But right now, my big thing, and I very seldom do this because I'm always afraid when I ask questions on Twitter, like no one will respond, which and it's not an unfounded fear. I asked something today about my podcast and just not even, just all crickets. I kind of went out and was like, hey, what do you guys recommend? I just finished up Gundam 00. And I wanted to know what people would, see if people would pitch me some shows to watch. And the long and the short of it was, I was put on Gintama, which a lot of people really came out for and said, you got to check this out. And so I started about 5 weeks ago, I want to say 4 or 5 weeks ago. And I just finished episode 87 or 88 earlier today, and I'm trying to shoot to be done with episode 100 by tomorrow. So I'm going to be watching some tonight and tomorrow to try to knock that out, because my eventual goal, it's 324 episodes. My eventual goal is to be caught up before 2017 is over, which I think I'm more than on track for, but I usually watch shows at such a glacial pace. I was like, I have got to really dig in and knock this show out if I want to try to catch up. And that was intimidating because I usually, the last really long show I watched was all of Fist or Hakuto no Ken 1 and 2, which is about 150 episodes, and that took me a couple of months. But I typically don't like to get into super long shows, especially like, something like, say, One Piece or Naruto. If for some reason I wanted to watch those, they're very intimidating. And even Gintama is not quite that long, but at 324
that's
episodes,
a pretty good
that's
sizable chunk of a show.
but I have been really enjoying it. A lot of people told me to skip the first couple episodes and jump into like episode 3 or 4, but I'm weird about these kinds of things. If you tell me to skip content, I generally just muscle through it anyway because I want to know why
Yeah.
people don't like a thing. I usually don't take their. I like to hate it myself. I don't want to borrow
Yeah,
anyone
like
else's
it's
hatred.
that whole entire thing when
But
someone tells you something is hot, you're like, okay, I understand that you're saying that it's hot, but I'm still gonna touch it myself to confirm.
my wife actually has the opposite thing. She'll be like, "Oh, this tastes
Yeah.
horrible. Here, you taste it." Like she wants me to share in her misery. But I jumped right in at episode 1, and I kind of liked it right out of the gate, to be perfectly honest. And I've only grown to love it more as I watched it. And I'm really really enjoying it. And I'm in part this was an exercise to see would people interact with me on Twitter in that way. And just I mean I'm still relatively new to the Twitter bubbles and all that, and really, people really have, and they've been. If I can say one thing or two things, really, it's Gintama's really really good. I'm so glad people convinced me to watch it because even though I've watched 80 plus episodes in a couple weeks, it doesn't feel like a lot because I've enjoyed it. And the other part of it is that the Gintama community, at least the Twitter community element, is really really passionate and a bunch of really cool
Yes,
people.
like I'm not a big fan of Gintama myself.
Oh, is it Gintama or Gintama? I've been saying Gintama. Is this like GIF and GIF?
Possibly, but again, like when they were releasing the manga in high school, they separated those two words, so I was read it as Jin
Right.
and Tama.
Right. Like gin
just
and
because-
tonic, gin and tama.
Yeah, right. But yeah, because like I actually picked up and bought the first 6 volumes of it when I was in high school, and kind of fell out of love with it, mainly because like it just kind of felt like it was just recycling poop jokes constantly.
There are certainly quite a few poop jokes.
Yeah, and that's not really my thing. And again, like that's all it really came down to for me, is that it's not my thing. But one thing I will say about that show, though, is that it has one really strong community that absolutely loves the hell out of that show.
Right,
and that kind of love and like that's inspiring. Like it really is so awesome to see such a really lively and passionate community for this one show.
Yeah, and maybe
it's really awesome.
Maybe there's some dark corner of the fandom or something that I haven't experienced, or maybe I'm just at the tip of the iceberg and everything below the surface is just wretched. But everyone I interact with about Gintama is super positive, really cool people, and I've just been like, they've sort of drawn me in, and I'm very appreciative to be in the club. And I'm just as positive on the show as I am. Like, I think the other part of it that I'm enjoying is connecting with all these really great people, because something about this show, the people that stick with it seems to draw out the best in them. So it's really great. I've been really enjoying it, and I'm in part I also the other sort of angle that I was doing as well. If I'm going to watch a long show, maybe I can sort of get something out of it in terms of an article or something like that. I mean, as writers for a blog, we always have to be thinking, is there something I can write, or is there something I can get out of this that could be an interesting piece or a thought piece, not just in a mercenary sense, but literally, like, could I have an original angle on this show, or could I bring up something that someone else hasn't seen? But I'm really just enjoying. I think what I'm coming to is I'm learning a lot about what it takes to watch a long show that's been in existence for a long time, and how to stick with it, and how to sort of stay positive and stay motivated, and like what it takes to consume that kind of content. Like, it's just a lot to consume. So how do you do it? And I think I've got some thoughts on that, because I don't know, never before in my life have I ever thought, you know what, I might be able to get into One Piece, because it's, as long as I've known about it, it's been just this massive thing, and it's only continued to grow. But after doing this, I'm climbing to the top of a mountain right now, and I'm thinking, could I make it to the top of Everest? I don't know. Like, I'm looking to that next mountain. So it's been fun, and I haven't really delved into a show this long. I mean, I guess the only thing comparable would be, Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. I can't think of another show this long that I've watched, but I'm really enjoying it, and I definitely recommend it to people. And I have some complicated thoughts as to why, I guess, but it's something that I've been really enjoying. What about yourself? What have you been watching?
Well, recently I just now started watching Precure, the newest series called Precure a la Mode, and Precure is something I've been meaning to get into for a while now because
Mm.
it's, again, like, I've mentioned this a couple of times in previous episodes, but I always kind of see it as, like, alongside with Kamen Rider. Like, you have Kamen Rider and Precure. Like, those are two, like, long-running shows that are always kind of going side by side.
Right.
And they have, like, really great fandoms and really cool things going on with each and every show. And I just never really got the chance to dive into Precure like I have Kamen Rider. And I decided to go ahead and take that plunge this week into Precure, and I'm really enjoying a la mode so far. It's been a really fun magical girl show filled with just a bunch of really awesome silly faces that if I could I would just tweet all day long. But it's a great, like, really fun show about just girls who have a strong passion for cooking and how their passion for cooking brings them together, and they fight evil monsters that want to steal the love that's baked within each and every one of the sweets. Like, it's again, like, it's a silly little show, but like, there is just that level of passion that's in there that I really like. And nowadays for me, like, I don't care what the concept is as long as there's a passion within the show. I really enjoy it. And this is a show that is just filled to the brim with that, and it's got some really fun characters and whatnot, and really great character designs. Like the character design for Chocolate, that's such a great design. Like, it's like straight out of Utena. Like, it's so good. Like, it's just I really love that character. But yeah, like, everyone else in the show is just equally as fun to watch, and it's just, again, like, it's fun. Like, it's one of those things where I have a hard time naming specifics about what makes it fun, but I think that's kind of the magic of shows like that, where it's just enjoyable for the sake of being enjoyable. Like, you don't have to think too much about it. It's just a fun magical girl show. Just relax and have fun with it. And on top of that, another fun thing is that at the end of every episode, they have like a 1-minute cooking tutorial that's kind of fun to watch too, of like the dessert that they made in that episode. So, like, again, like, there's a bunch of fun stuff in it like that.
That's neat. That's always fun when they do those little things like that. Yeah. I mean, I probably shouldn't watch it. I'm not a great cook anyway. I definitely don't need to learn how to make any sweets. So maybe that's not for me. That's just a temptation. And, but that is good.
Yeah, and as a fat guy, the idea of cake giving you superpowers is really awesome. Like, that's just been a lifelong dream of mine.
Right. That's the hope. You're just like, I gotta believe cake will give me superpowers.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and wind down this week with a listener question.
Sure.
Again, if you're interested in sending a listener question to our podcast, all you have to do is join our Patreon, and that's for a single $1. You can go ahead and sign up with that. And our question this week comes from a Cutie Devil Z. Cutie Devil Z writes, what is a manga that you find inspiring? Now, they didn't clarify what they meant by inspiring.
Which means that we can just go completely bonkers with the definition. We just forget any Socratic method of defining our terms. Let's just go hog wild with what inspiring could be. Do you want to take this first, or should I? I'm not really a huge manga reader, but
I guess
I do have a few.
I'll go ahead and start first. A manga that I did find relatively inspiring in terms of just style and really great storytelling was Devilman, and by Gonagai. And one of the main reasons for that was that it was a show, it was a manga that had this really fascinating progression where it started off as basically two kids going, hey, let's go hunt demons, by becoming demons ourselves.
Right, and, as you do.
Yeah.
We've all been through that phase, really.
And, it's this really fun teenage power fantasy of, being able to take the darkness and being consumed by it and fight the evils that scare you. And it's a really good superhero show. And then all of a sudden it takes this twist towards the end where it kind of becomes this witch hunt where it kind of values, like, it really examines what it means to be a superhero, what victories are determined by. Just because you killed a monster doesn't mean you win the battle. And
Right.
there's a lot of really fascinating ideas that go along with this storyline, especially when you get to the ending, which I don't want to spoil for people. But, like, there is a moment in there where it is just kind of heart-wrenching because he's done everything that a hero is supposed to do, and he loses. And it really does make you kind of examine, just like, well, what was he supposed to do? And again, like, that mindset of, like, kind of taking this expectation of what you're supposed to do and turning it on its head and examining it, I find that really fascinating. And it kind of, like, because, like, we were talking about those kind of, like, those highs that we're always kind of constantly trying to chase with new shows, and I think that's a high I'm constantly trying to chase myself. So when I say inspiring, I think that's what Devilman inspired in me, was to find something that challenged an idea, no matter how simple it is, like a superhero, and wanting it to be elevated than just a person who saves the day. And so, yeah, that's my pick.
Okay. So I'm not a huge manga reader, but there are a few that I've read. And this one I've not read to completion, but I'm very familiar with the OVA series that it was that it inspired, and I also just love the manga itself. But Kaoru Shintani's Area 88 is very inspiring to me, and Area 88 is definitely an old Taku favorite. It's about a pilot who's a commercial airline pilot, but he gets sort of drafted against his will into this mercenary flight group out in some in the Middle East, and is flying combat sorties in these planes, and it's about war, and it's about death and loss, and a lot of things that these types of shows typically tend to be about, or these types of manga. I think the thing that inspires me about it, I mean, usually for me, things that are inspiring usually come in one of two forms. Inspiring either makes me want to be able to do something, or something that's inspiring makes me sort of marvel at the capability of human beings. So, like, if I read a really good article or I read a good book, I think, ooh, I want to write like that. But then sometimes I see something that I find inspiring, like, say, I don't know, like the pyramids of Giza or something. I'm like, wow, human beings made that. Like, human beings put that together. How incredible. And I think for me, Area 88 falls into the latter category. If for nothing else, I love the themes, I love the story, I think it holds up very well. The character designs are really, really fun, but I just, those planes, the way Kaoru Shintani draws those planes, there's such detail and there's such passion for it, and that kind of obsessiveness with getting it right, and just looking at all those well-designed planes on the page. There's just something about that I always have wished that I was artistic in that way, or that I was skilled in the visual arts. But even if I could, like, I mean, an artist friend of mine once told me, nobody ever gets worse at drawing. As long as you keep practicing, you will get good. But I see in his art, I see in these planes that even if I were to spend the rest of my life drawing, knowing myself and how kind of goofy and sort of color outside the lines that I can be, that I would never develop along that route to be that kind of specific and realistic. So I see something that I see in that something that I could never do, but I am amazed that a human being can do. Like, it blows my mind, especially because it's just page after page after page of these just gorgeous looking mechanical designs, and I'm so amazed by it. I find it very inspiring.
Cool. Well, thanks for the question, Cutie Devil Z. We really appreciate that.
That was a good question.
Yes,
it was a good question.
Good one. All right, so we're going to go ahead and draw our show to a close this week. Thank you so much for coming on, Grant, and thank you so much for listening, everyone. Where is the best place to find you on the internets?
You can find me at Grant the Thief on Twitter. You'll know me. I have the Weeping Kenshiro avatar in some way, shape, or form. I'm always on there talking about random nonsense. You can find me writing at the wonderful Wave Motion Canon, which always have articles popping up on there every now and then. And you can also find me either on this podcast and the other Wave Motion podcasts, or on my podcast that I host with a couple of my buddies in the real world, the Blade Licking Thieves. We have been a little bit behind on a few updates here, but we have a new episode dropping very soon, interview with a really cool person in the community, and we'll have some new stuff popping up pretty recently.
Sweet.
Or I should say soon.
That sounds most excellent, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, and I'm CJ Hitchcock. You can find me on CJ Hitchcock on Twitter and on the Wave Motion Canon. And do you think I should hype the anime of the year? Do you think we're at a point where we can hype that?
Well, I guess we can say this. The Anime of the Year podcast is coming. We have at least wrapped recording, but the scale of it, because we did we took on a monumental challenge. I think it'll still be some time before we've finished editing and getting that really prepared. But I think when it's done, it's going to be something pretty incredible, honestly. I don't know if there's going to be anything quite like it once we're done.
Yes, I will concur with that. It definitely was a test of everyone's skill and endurance, and it was a lot of fun. A lot of yelling and screaming at each other, but it was. I think it was worth it for the final product. I do.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely put a part of ourselves into that podcast. I mean, just raw hours. There's some of our lives in that.
Yes, we battled sickness and just there was it like this is going to be a great show. Like I really do think that, and I think you guys will enjoy it at home or in the car or wherever you're listening to this. You might be at a library, or even you, Steve. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Steve, sitting in the library.
Man, poor Steve getting put on the spotlight.
Yeah.
Get put out on Front Street.
we appreciate you, though, Steve. We're just letting you know that we care. So. All right. And at the end of our show, like we're always going to do, we'd like to go ahead and have this time right now to give a little shout-out to our 10-plus backers on the Patreon. And those are Osama_A, Cornelia Natsudi, Chris Magnifico, and Ben Grant. Thank you very much for your donations. We very much appreciate it. All right. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, guys.